Welcome to Cloud Interview Questions, an initiative by CloudWorthy. So today we are going to see what are all the different service models that are available to the cloud customers, right? So now, like previously, we have seen the difference between the traditional on-premise model and the cloud computing, right? We see what are all the advantages of cloud computing, how like organizations are now leaning towards leveraging the available cloud services, right? Now, the organization has decided to utilize or leverage the cloud service, right? So what are all the service models? What are all the different types of options that they can avail, right? So based on the application need, based on the organization's compliance and regulatory standards, it is customers have like multiple opportunities or options to pick up, right? The core service models, the three types of service models, which are across all the different cloud players. You can take Azure, you can take AWS, right? They all have these three types of service models generally available to the customer, and customer based on their need, they can pick either of these options, right? The first one is called software as a service, second one is platform as a service, and third is infrastructure as a service. So we will go from the bottom, right? So previously we have established that the objective of the cloud computing is to outsource the infrastructure, right? The end objective is to host an application. The application can be a web application, it can be a desktop application, or it can be an mobile application, right? It can be any application, but it has to be hosted on top of a cloud server, right? So the different stages that those applications have are generally the data, right? So you may log into any like coding website, any website, you will store, they have to store your data, right? They have to store a data, they have to store your username, password, and all, right? So it has data, and you're generally using an application. It may be a mobile application or a website application. So the data, using the application, we will be storing our data somewhere, and that application will generally be running in an operating system. As developers, we know like we will have some operating system on top of it. We will run those, will deploy those applications, and we will provision it to the end customer, and we will store the end customer's data as well as our application data. And the last is the operating system generally sits on the infrastructure. And this is what previously organization they themselves will try to own it, and that is called traditional on-premise model. And if they actually outsource it to a third party, right? If they actually go for a renting model instead of buying, then we go for cloud computing, right? So these are the four layers. So infrastructure at the bottom, and then we will go for operating system. On top of it, we will have an operating system. That operating system is generally we call it as guest operating system, and on top of it we'll build some application libraries like using the Java library, JRE, or .NET framework. Like we will be building an runtime environment, and then we will deploy the application that we want to run, and that application will consume the data, right? So now the cloud customer or cloud service provider is providing multiple options to these cloud customers. Cloud customer can generally just rent on- only the infrastructure, and they can choose what operating system they need to run, and then they can choose the application that they want to run, and they can store the data. So that is generally infrastructure as a service. We are just as a customer just renting only the physical infrastructure that is available, right? And rest all would be managed by the cloud customer themselves. So that is infrastructure as a service. If you move on, like in many cases, the we would just hire the developers, right? We need not hire an infrastructure engineer if you are just going for a cloud computing, right? In those cases, we are just saying, hey, I don't want to maintain any infrastructure or operating system. See, my team consists only of developers who are proficient in their programming languages like Java or Python, right? So they have no idea on maintaining these servers, maintaining those operating systems, right? So cloud service provider, please take manage that, or please take care of it. We will just configure, we'll just build the applications, and we will test them, and then we'll deploy them, right? That is our only focus. Whenever the organization focuses on application development and testing, they generally go for platform as a service. Here the cloud service provider is responsible for operating system as well as the infrastructure, while the cloud customer or the organization is responsible for building the applications, right? This has a shared responsibility model where the maintenance of the application would be taken care by the organization, while maintaining the operating system and the infrastructure devices would be taken care by the cloud service provider. And the more convenient option for the cloud customer is software as a service, wherein the cloud customer will like request the cloud service provider to give infrastructure, operating system, as well as the application, right? So what do the customer do? Customer is generally responsible for the data that they bring. Data and the governance would be taken care by the cloud customer. Rest all like application, operating system, and infrastructure would be taken care by the cloud service provider. The example for software as a service is generally your Office 365, or you use Google Drive, right? So where in Google Drive we don't have any control on what type of application they are running, right? What type of operating system they use, where those operating systems are like saved, right? Where those infrastructure is present, right? We don't have any control, or we don't have any visibility over the information. In a Google Drive, the only thing that we can control is the data that we upload and download, right? So that is a best example for software as a service. In case of platform as a service, you can generally take like your VDIs, like where the operating system would be fixed, right? You can just run any applications on that, right? So that is a best example for platform as a service. In case of infrastructure as a service, the VMs, right? If you choose a VM, you can choose whatever image you want to load. You can load either a Windows image or a Ubuntu image. You can choose whatever size you want. Like you can go for a D4s, you can go for a D8s, right? You can choose whatever size you want. You can choose for whatever type of storage options you want. You can go for a HDD option, or you can go for an SDD. So all these options, all these controls can be configured by the cloud organization themselves or cloud customer themselves. Right? So that is generally the example for infrastructure as a service. And if you, in terms of pricing, infrastructure as a service is the cheapest one because we are just renting the infrastructure alone. Right? So we need to have some players to actually configure the OS and build the application environment and then run the application. And while SaaS is the costliest one, right? Because everything would be provided by the cloud service provider. You have to just take care of the data alone. So these are the three different service model options that are generally available to the cloud customers. Thank you and see you tomorrow.